This episode is brought to you by Munich High-End, the world's leading international audio show, running May 15 through 18 at the MOC.
Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Darko.Audio podcast. Joining me again this time out is Srajan Ebaen, who's right now in Ireland. Welcome back, Srajan.
Thank you. And as you can tell, I'm wearing one for the team, all green for Ireland.
And for the people who are just listening to this, Srajan is wearing a checked plaid green shirt. So yeah, it is very. Is it St. Patrick's Day? Was that this weekend or last weekend? I think it's this weekend, isn't it? Anyway, we're not here to talk about national holidays. We're here to talk about hi-fi gear, news items that have come across our collective desks in the last couple of months. I think we've got 3 each as usual, and as usual, we're going to try and dig a little bit under the surface on these rather than just parrot verbatim what comes in the release itself. And I'm going to start with something that is related to vinyl, which you don't do. So right. I can say anything I like here, and you probably won't challenge me on it. So one of the big problems with there are many problems with vinyl, and whenever I talk about vinyl on YouTube, in the comment section, there's always like 4 people who are telling me why they don't do vinyl anymore, right? Even though I've not asked for that opinion, they're going to tell me, because they're very adamant that they want the world to know that they don't do vinyl because of 2 things, mainly. It's usually the snap, crackle and pop surface noise. That's the number one thing that comes up. But the second thing that comes up quite a lot is warped records. Mm-hmm. And this often gets thrown in with the used market. But I personally, if I get a warped record, it's usually because it's come from Amazon or it's come from overseas, and it's just been in a vehicle somewhere with the sun beating down on it, and it's just got warped in transit. So generally when that happens, especially if it's come from the UK, where to send something back you've got to navigate duties and taxes, and same with the USA and things like that, I just kind of live with the warped record, right? I live with it unless it's really bad, and if it's really, really bad, I'll buy another copy. But there are devices out there that allow us to flatten those warped records. And they're like mini ovens, electric ovens. And this week, Pro-Ject, who obviously make tons of different turntables, they make more turntables than I can keep track of. There's a new one coming out every single week, right? They just throwing new products out the door, and I don't say that that they're doing it in a slipshod way. It's more than any man can keep up with. But this new product is called the Flatten It, which is a record flattener. Mm-hmm. And I guess it looks like a slimline toaster with a flip-up lid. You put the record in the cavity, you flip the lid down, you lock the lid, and you plug it into the mains. And I think what the idea is that inside that device, excuse me, there are 2 plates that heat up very slowly and compress the record into its ideally original shape. And one thing I don't know about this new Flatten It, because the press release doesn't say, is how long that process takes. Mm-hmm. So it's quite an interesting product in that it's made in the EU, so it's not made in China, for all the people that kind of care about that kind of thing. It sells for €800, which, whilst not being the cheapest vinyl flattener on the market, there are a couple I've noticed that sell from the HHV or HHV store in Berlin for about $1,500. But the Pro-Ject one, is half of that, and it looks to be of similar build quality. So I think it's made of aluminium and then aluminum for the Americans, and it just it allows you to slowly cook your record back to its original shape. Now, I think I'm going to make a video about this because I think it's interesting just from a general perspective, if nothing else. But what I want to know is how long it takes, and does the process of flattening the record distort the grooves in any way? I just don't know. It might not. But you have a question, Srajan, I can see.
Yeah, like an idiot's question, like somebody who doesn't do vinyl. On the labels that are on the vinyl record that tell you what it is, on those paper, and wouldn't that paper, when it heats up under one of those machines, and the paper is presumably glued to the vinyl record, wouldn't something happen to that label?
I don't think so, because I think the way that the two plates that are doing the heating, they're probably donut shaped. So they probably have a hole in the middle that doesn't heat up to remove the label. I'm guessing. I don't know. I've never had a vinyl flattener. I did see one, I think in Australia years ago. It was like a pouch, and then you put the vinyl in between two plates, and then you put that in a pouch and you plug it into the mains and it heats up. So this is kind of not a budget solution, but it's not one of those sort of deluxe solutions that you see elsewhere from very, very small companies. And I guess Pro-Ject have the economies of scale to really drive the build cost down on this that probably those smaller companies don't have, because they make so many other vinyl related products, and now they own Musical Fidelity, so they're doing all that production in the Czech Republic, I think it is.
Yeah,
so
Karnov. Actually, it's Slovakia.
Is it in Slovakia? Okay, I don't. Okay, so they might even have more than one factory. Who knows? But they have a lot of stuff that they're making. So I guess when they're buying stuff from third parties, they can drive the price down. So that hopefully this will be a good and effective product. I do have one record that arrived warped recently. My first in a long time. It was an Orb record, a double LP, and both discs are warped. And I'm happy to sort of sacrifice that at the altar of investigation to see whether it changes the sound, because I'm going to buy another copy. So I'll have hopefully a flat copy. Excuse me, it's arriving in Berlin this week. And then I'll have a copy that I've flattened using this Pro-Ject device, and we'll see if they sound any different. And obviously I'll be able to film the difference. I mean, that's clear that you can show whether it does what it says it does. But I'm really interested in, are there any sort of distortions to the grooves, and are they audible? Because I'm sure that there's going to be loads of turntable enthusiasts out there who want to tell us that, you know, these things are terrible and they'll do this to the grooves and this to the grooves. And my turntable setup at home right now in Berlin is not too shabby. You know, I've got a Torrens TD124, the 140th edition. I've got a PS Audio phono stage. I'm also using the phono stage and a big Technics amp at the moment as well. So I think I've got a setup of sufficient caliber that if there are differences, it should show up. But then again, it might only show up with lesser turntables. So maybe I need to wheel one of those out of the cupboard. We'll see.
Or
I don't know, but I think
it might depend on the severity of how much the record is actually warped. Like how much does the machine have to compensate?
Right. I mean, I guess I can't account for every possibility. I mean, I guess I could leave a record in the sun. I do have a couple of records that I'm happy to sacrifice. So I could leave one in the sun. In a window.
Sun in Berlin? That doesn't sound right.
You wouldn't, honestly, Srajan, in the summer it gets to, we have week-long runs of 35, 40 degrees.
Oh, holy crap.
I have AC in my apartment. It's really intense in the summer.
Okay.
Last year I had to put up, this is going completely off topic, I had to put what's called a Schutzfolie, like a protective foil, on the outside of my upstairs because it was just getting too warm during the daytime. Okay. And it blocks 80% of the ultraviolet, is it UV? Yeah, UV rays from the sun. It's amazing. It's transformed my apartment. And I'm probably going to do the downstairs this year. Very expensive, but well worth it in terms of saving on using the AC. Anyway, so yeah, the sun is strong enough in Germany to warp a record, most definitely. So
all right.
We'll see whether the Pro-Ject Flatten It comes through. Probably in a couple of months I'll have something on that. So yeah, I have asked for a sample, and I think they're going to come through pretty quickly. So yeah, I guess watch this space. So yeah, over to you, Srajan. I guess you've got something weird and wacky for us this time.
It's neither weird nor wacky, actually.
Okay.
So if I say to you DC, and I qualify by saying I don't mean Washington, so we're in the hi-fi space, and I say DC, what comes up for you?
Direct current?
Yes. And why might that be anything worthwhile talking about? When we're not talking battery power, when we're just DC on the AC mains line.
Oh yeah, so DC on the mains is problematic. It can cause hums, right?
Yes. Do you know where the hum occurs?
So usually, in my experience, it occurs in the transformer in an amplifier. If it's a big transformer. So in Berlin, I have DC on my mains. I have to use a blocker to stop the transformers in Class A/B amps from humming.
That's exactly what I was getting at. I'm going to read something to make sure I get this correct. This is from Isotech. Isotech is a UK company that makes power line equipment, also manufactured by Karnov in Slovakia. And they say, I'm going to read this now, so-called DC on the mains is an increasing problem caused by many home appliances which generally run a series diode. For example, dimmer switches, hair dryers, and coffee machines. Solar panels on the roof, elevators, and fast charging stations for electric cars cause even more DC issues.
Oh, I didn't know
These
that.
could be in your house, in your neighborhood, or further down the road. Strictly speaking, the problem is an imbalance of the main sine wave on the 0 volts line. Any AC waveform which does not exhibit equal energy in its positive and negative phase will contain a DC component regardless of the peak voltages or wave shape involved. This DC will partially or fully saturate magnetic circuits, which would be transformers, and can cause considerable mechanical vibration, not only in amplifiers, but all electronics, to dramatically affect their performance. So
This lines up entirely with my experience, yeah.
okay. So I first became hip to DC on the AC, DC on the mains, when I had that really tall Zeus subwoofer. Comes up about to my high chest on a footprint, on a 1 foot square footprint, so small but tall. And the bloody thing hummed. Really annoying.
Okay.
And I made sure that it wasn't a ground loop. It wasn't. And now I didn't know what to do. Ship the thing back, live with a hum. And at the time I was still living in Switzerland. And the sales manager of Nagra told me, I've got the solution for you. I said, what is it? He said, there's this Englishman that moved to Spain and he has a company called Vibex. And in our lab, we're using his DC blockers because our lab technicians noticed that when they use this DC blocker, their measurement kit, the noise field drops significantly enough that they can look much deeper into what before was the noise floor. That means the measurements get more precise, and we can in turn engineer better sounding equipment because we can see better what's happening. Nagra was swearing by it. I took him by his word. I got one of them and have lived with it ever since. Now, this piece has been on my front end stack. So not big transformers and power amplifiers, but small transformers and DACs and USB bridges and preamps and CD players and transports. So transformers that never audibly hummed to begin with. If they were noisy, I didn't hear it. And still, this DC blocker made a significant sonic improvement. So ever since that time, I've had it. And I haven't given it a second thought. Basically, problem solved, and I haven't thought of it. Well, just very recently, Kinki Studio and Vinshine Audio in Singapore came out with a product that's called Taihang. Taihang apparently is a chain of mountains that goes through China, and the mountain peaks are between 1.5 and 2 kilometers tall. So some tall mountains, a whole range called Taihang, and they named a DC blocker with 4 outlets. It's called the Taihang, currently sells for $1,200 US. And I put this thing on 4 power amplifiers, 4 mono amps, 2 for the speakers and 2 for the subwoofer. The subwoofer has dual 15-inch drivers. Each driver gets its own amplifier. So these are big transformers in these amplifiers. And the sonic difference was astonishing. Now what I had before was a Furotech, completely passive. It's not even a filter. It's just a, what do you call it, a power distributor, like an outlet multiplier. One wall outlet becomes 4 or 6 outlets because you don't have enough in the wall. And I've always preferred the passive Furotech to any kind of active filters. So I've lived with passive Furotechs for many years, and again, I never looked into this subject any further. So I replaced the Furotech with this Taihang, which has 60 small capacitors on the inside and 2 rather large inductors, like chokes. And boy, the primary difference that I heard was as though my tweeters had improved. Like I heard a whole lot more upper harmonics, particularly on piano. So tone colors got, I like to use the word fresh, like a fresh fruit salad that is just made, and you have all the fruit acids and the sugars and the vitamins and the enzymes. They sort of seem to like pop and sparkle, and you let that thing sit on the counter for half an hour, and some of that goes down, and 2 hours later, you know, the apples have turned brown and the bananas have gone to mush, and it doesn't taste the same. So that kind of freshness, when the contrast between sweet and sour, and when that is still at its highest, that's kind of what I got out of this Tai-Hung. It is so good that I bought the review sample, and I'm buying a second one for my other system. And so this is 4 outlets on the back.
Okay, so it is like a net style. So it's like a power distributor, right?
It's like a power distributor. So you know, one IEC inlet, power cord goes in, no on-off switch, just a tiny little blue LED on the front, really well built, very deep horizontal ripples on the front, so it looks like a proper Kinki Studio. It's very heavy for its size, and 4 outlets. And you can get them EU style, so Schuko. You can get them US, and maybe one of these days they'll have UK, but right now they have US and EU. Now the surprising thing is that a lot of people will think, well, okay, I can see it on front-end components because they don't use a lot of power. They don't draw a whole lot of current. But on my amplifiers with big transformers, I want to go straight into the wall for maximum current. I don't want anything current limiting. Well, from what I can tell, at the levels, the sound pressure levels that I listen to, I don't hear any dynamic compression whatsoever. But some kind of noise that I didn't even hear before has clearly gone down. Enough noise floor has gone down where these really homeopathic doses of harmonics are much more apparent. And I say it's like a better tweeter because we are talking about the high frequencies. That's where it's most noticeable. Yeah. They have gotten a lot better. So I've given it an award for $1,200. What it does in my system relative to what's in there and how much money I have invested in my system, I think it's a very, very cost-effective upgrade. And it's not an AC filter. It's a DC blocker. And DC on the mains is not necessarily something that we are causing ourselves. It could be down the road. So by the time the power sort of comes out of our wall socket, it's already baked in. The only way to get rid of it, you have to have some kind of a blocker.
So this, what you said when you were reading from the Isotech website about elevators, right? Because I've got an elevator in my building in Berlin. It sits right behind my apartment. It's about 5 meters away. So this might be why I've got DC on the mains and why I need to stop my transformers from humming, the bigger ones, with a DC blocker. I use one from iFi. It's about $100.
Right.
And when I talk about hum, I'm not talking about hum through the speakers. We're not talking about that. We're talking about a mechanical hum from the transformer itself, right? So I find them pretty useful for that. But I've heard many products like this down the years that do things that actually defied my expectations, especially initially.
Well,
so
in this case, the proof is actually very simple, right? Transformer hums, you plug it in there, stops humming, period.
Yep.
But on that note, what I want to leave our listeners or viewers with is that DC blockers even work when you don't think you have a hum problem. Like when your transformers don't hum and you think, well, everything is just peachy. Because what the Isotech quote reminds us of is that any DC present will stress our transformers. They won't operate at full efficiency. And that fact alone will have an impact on the sound. So even though it may not be bad enough to mechanically hum and vibrate, if you can make that transformer operate 100% rather than 90 or 80 or 70%, it will have an influence on your sound. And so it is,
I mean,
it is also good for front-end components that have never been noisy to begin with.
Right, and I think, if you went to your local hi-fi store, you could have them demonstrate this quite clearly. So I'm going to talk a little bit about high-res audio. I'm going to talk about a format that I almost never use. Do you know what that is? Like, it's a digital format. I never use it.
Either SACD, DSD, or MQA. Well, MQA is finished, so I would say DSD, SACD.
SACDs, right? So whenever I review a CD player, I always get questions in the comments. Always get questions. Does it do SACDs? And I'm thinking to myself, if it did, you think I would not say so in the main video, right? But very rarely do I review a CD player that actually does SACDs. But there's one that a new one that came across my desk this week, and it's made by Shanling, so the Chinese company. But strangely, it's being made. I say strangely, I mean it's probably not that strange really. It's being offered under a sub brand, and I'm trying to find this in my notes.
Onix.
Oh, yes, Onix. Yes, Onix. Yes. And the model name is.
I believe that used to be a separate UK brand, and I believe that they had these gloss black, very, very shiny looking chassis. And eventually the brand probably went away, and maybe Shanling is reviving it? Could that be?
I didn't get that far. Like, I saw this on Facebook one evening when I was scrolling last week. So I immediately emailed Frankie at Shanling, my contact, and said, do you have any press information on this? He's like, not yet, but here's what I've got so far. So I ran with that because I really like what Shanling are doing, especially in the CD space, apart from the big spaceship flagship, which I don't like the look of. But this one is a lot more affordable. It is an SACD transport. Obviously, it does CDs as well. Should get that out of the way. It's called the Zenith XST20. Another catchily named product. But it's coming under the Onix brand. And the idea is that it can extract the DSD content from an SACD and then pipe it out of its digital inputs on the back. I don't know how they're doing this. I know that PS Audio have done this for years. Again, I'm not quite sure of how or even the legality of it with respect to Sony's encryption, because I'm pretty sure that the data on an SACD is encrypted. I could be wrong. Let me know in the comments if I am wrong about that. But for whatever reason, maybe Sony don't care to enforce this. I don't know. But it seems to me that there are smaller manufacturers who have found a way to kind of get the DSD stream off the disc, pipe it out of the back. Now, the interesting thing about this new Shanling, or two things actually. Firstly, it's a top loader. So it's not a drawer, it's not a slot, it's a top loader. It's like the oven dish thing that you'd find on the ET3 transport that I reviewed a couple of years ago, which is a little sort of small sub $1,000 CD transport. So it's a bit like that. So the lid is both the puck and the lid as well. So it's all in one piece. So I love that. I love top loaders. I don't know why, but it just feels to me when I'm playing a CD, it feels more like a physical event, like playing a record, right? So that's the first interesting thing for me. Second, it has 6 digital outputs, of which, Srajan, can you guess which one most audiophiles are going to go bananas for?
I2S over HDMI.
Bingo. Well, yeah, I believe it is HDMI, yes. So
And
I2S...
Is it configurable?
It is configurable. I think there are, let me look in my notes, I think is it 10 different pinouts? Yeah. So there's a menu system, there's a touchscreen on the front. You can select the pinout that corresponds to your DAC because there's no industry standard for this. So different DAC manufacturers have the pin in configured differently. So you should be able to get this to work with most I2 input DACs. I think Shanling and Onix have a dedicated DAC coming soon and a transport as well. But at this stage, it's just the SACD transport. Sorry, when I said transport, I meant streaming transport. But if you don't want to do I2S, you can get DSD. Well, it's DSD 64 that's coming out of this device. I'm pretty sure it's 128 on the disc, but I could be wrong.
No, the disc would be SACD,
256,
which is DSD 64. But,
it is 64.
Yeah,
okay,
but if the Shanling has an upsampler built in, then I2S would be good for DSD 128.
I don't think it does. I don't think it has an upsampler.
Okay.
at all. I think, as far as I know, it's just DSD64 out the back on the I2S socket.
Okay.
See, this is it. I'm out of my depth here because I don't do it. I own one SACD. I own an SACD of Matthew Sweet's Girlfriend, the Intervention Records edition, just so that I've got one in the house if I need one to cover a product like this, right? And the reason, I'll tell you why I'm kind of a little bit cool on SACDs, is because there are bugger all of them available. And even the ones that I might have wanted to have, that I might want to own, are long since deleted. They're not in production anymore. So something will be in production for a couple of years and it's gone. So not only is the total number of SACDs ever produced tiny compared to the streaming library or anything like that, but the number of SACDs that you can go out and buy today, new, is even smaller, and very little of it covers my music taste.
Well, that's what I was going to say, because I believe that if you were to go to Japan or deal with some kind of a mail order house in Japan, and if you were into classic jazz and classic period, that you would find loads of SACDs, but only in those particular genres.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I know down the years, I think there's been some Peter Gabriel stuff that I wouldn't mind owning, some Depeche Mode stuff that I wouldn't mind owning. But even then, if I was going to get really purist about it, like how was the transfer done? Was it from the tape to the DSD file, or was there an interstitial sort of PCM stage? I don't know.
Right.
And I can't be bothered to kind of go that far into it because it becomes too obsessive. I know I cover a lot of obsessive stuff, but when it comes to what happened in the studio, I can't possibly know, so I can't really dig in that far. So yeah, maybe some Steely Dan stuff. I do like Steely Dan, it's just that I can't stand listening to it at hi-fi shows because it's just hammered constantly. But, you know, there are a few things that I wouldn't mind owning, but yeah, like I bought the Matthew Sweet because it was available. I thought, this is not going to be available forever. I'll get one now because it's got a CD in the tray as well. So I just thought, well, I've got one, but I won't be reviewing this Shanling for these very reasons, right? Because people will be like, well, you only reviewed it with one album, John, you're an idiot. I'm going to be like, yeah, fair enough, I am generally, but like in that particular case, yeah, I would be an idiot just to review an SACD player with only one CD. Although that could be a funny, you know, YouTube video title. I bought an SACD player to play one SACD. That could be, yeah, comedic. But I do want to add a couple more things to this this news piece. There's more than I2S on the back. There is Toslink, Coax, BNC, AES, EBU. Now they all output DSD64 using DOP, right? So that's DSD over PCM. I'm not going to get into that again because I don't really know much about it because I've never had to dig in because I'm not into SACDs all that much. And lastly, the price. It is going to sell in the US for $2,300 US. And it's going to start shipping, I believe, in April. So I think the way I see this is it's a more affordable alternative to PS Audio's Perfect Wave SACD transport. Yeah. That's all I can probably say about it, really. You know, there's a USB output on the back, which is very unusual, but that does not do an SACD output at all. It's just PCM. Mm-hmm. So they've probably got some kind of processor in there handling all the data. I know that the I2S pinout is managed by an FPGA. Maybe it's the same FPGA doing all this sort of mathematics under the hood. Maybe it's a different one. I just don't know. But if you are into SACDs and you do have a DAC that has DSD inputs, especially I2S, this product could be for you. It's not for me. And I'm not going to get bent out of shape that it's not for me.
And one thing we also do know is that because it does SACD and CD, that the transport mechanism is not a computer-based DVD transport. This is a transport that was designed specifically for music, and there's not a whole lot of them left. Most likely, I would assume it's from Denon and Marantz, because they have their own SACD transport, or it could be Stream Unlimited in Austria, I don't know. But there's very few left.
I think they're the only two come. Do TIAC?
Well, TIAC is
outsource theirs?
Do one. Luxman do one. And there's a small company in France that have their own universal transport that even does Blu-ray.
Right. So we're going to go back to you, Srajan, for your next item.
Yes. So now I'm going to model something. So those people that are only listening, you'll have to explain to them what you see. So give me one moment.
Okay. Oh my goodness. So Srajan is taking his headphones off. So he probably can't hear me right now, so I can probably say anything I like and he won't even notice. He's putting some other headphones on. It's a different headphone. Oh, I know what this is. Yeah, so Srajan is wearing the new Meze Poet headphone. And now he's taking them off. That was the thonk, and now he's putting his other ones back on. You should have heard the names I called you, Srajan, while your normal headphones weren't plugged in. People will say so in the comments. It was absolutely... I'm sorry. So this is the Renaro driver, right?
Correct. It's a Renaro driver.
A Renaro driver.
Supposedly,
AMTS.
this has been nicked from the Meze Elite, but
Right.
it's been shrunk in size to fit. And if we look really close, does the camera focus? I believe it does.
Yeah, it says AMTS on the sort of plastic insert.
Yeah, so this is like a material absorption technology licensed from Dan Clark.
Right. Yeah.
So people saw that I just took off the pad.
Yeah.
In
Removable.
typical Meze
Yeah.
style, it snaps on and off. But here's something interesting, because again, for those people who only listen, my apologies, but this is the €2,000
The lyric.
dollar
It's a lyric close
lyric.
back. Yeah. Yeah.
And you see how the attachment of the shaft relative to the headband is offset.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
And you see this headband is like one solid
It's one
cushy
piece.
thing
Yeah. Yeah.
versus
And I think it's suspended. Yeah, suspended
versus
headband.
now we have, like Dan Clark again.
Yeah,
Dan
yeah.
Clark called it nitinol, which is some kind of metal with a memory effect that's used with dental implants.
Right.
So basically,
I mean-
the metal will always sort of go back to its original
Right.
shape. But here we see that the attachment is centered. And my
Right.
problem with the Lyric 2 was that because of how it's attached, the cups always wanted to roll off and break
Okay.
the seal. I had a bear of
Okay.
a time getting to grips with wearing the Lyric 2. So this is the new Poet,
Yep.
$2,000 or euros. It's not sealed, like
It's
like the
So the lyric is a close, isn't it?
the Lyric is closed, and we see that
Yeah.
because there's just like a little a vent bore. It's not a port.
Yeah.
It's just
Yeah.
lets some air come out to depressurize what's happening inside the cup. I just got these for review. They're basically Meze's attempt, that's how I read it, to get the elite Empyrean type open backed sound to the price level of the Lyric 2. So instead of like $3,000 or $4,000, we're going down to $2,000. The size is smaller, the weight is a little bit lower. It's 350G without the pads, which is silly because who's going to wear them without the pads? Give us the weight with the pads. Then we're talking 415 grams, but it's still reasonably lightweight for a quote-unquote full-size planar magnetic dual-sided or dual balanced motor headphone. This is right now the slider adjustment for my head, which is pretty big, but I still got about a centimeter worth of
Play.
So if somebody
Yeah.
with an even taller egg-shaped head than me could probably wear these. What is a slightly narrow is the opening inside. My ears are rather small, so I don't touch anything. But if my ears were a little wider, this would probably be a quasi on-ear rather than a round-the-ear design. The entries are severely angled, so there's no need for there to be any channel markings because you can see which one is left and which one is right. But for the idiots amongst us, there is a channel marker up here that says left and write on the other side. So if we can't figure out that
That's
these
me.
things are not supposed to go backwards, we still
Yeah,
have a
they're meant to go
visual
forwards, yeah.
reminder.
Yeah.
And the headband is quite different this time. But I find them extremely comfortable. And like all Meze headphones, the industrial design and the fit and finish
It's fantastic, yeah.
is
yeah.
out of this world.
Yeah.
Sonically, I still have to do my review, but I already have certain first impressions. It's not a high resolution headphone. It's a comfort sound on the warmer side, but with the typical sort of Meze excitement on the top, which for younger listeners possibly could become maybe too forward. But if you're my age and maybe your high frequency hearing is not quite what it used to be, it seems just right. Now, I would not spend €2,000 on a headphone like these and wear them outside, but they are supposedly made to go mobile, 50 ohm impedance, reasonable sensitivity, but I would think that most people would probably wear them indoors on stationary rather than mobile kit.
I tell you where that lower impedance and higher sensitivity really comes in useful at home is with integrated amps and other sort of devices that have a built-in headphone socket. And
yeah, very often those headphone outputs are IC driven, like it's an amp on a chip.
Yeah, it's an op amp. Yeah, yes.
Made for that kind of use. So you
They
don't
can
have to
sound
design.
really good. Yeah,
they can
Right.
if you have the right load.
Yeah, but I think, and that's why I really like the idea, and I've said this for years, right? Even with portable players, buy a headphone that matches your portable player, not the other way around.
Yeah.
Because it seems to be... Anyway, I've made my point. I do want to say something, though, because Meze did ask me to review this, and I said no. And there were several reasons. I want to make this clear as to why. Number one, as we discussed on this podcast, Srajan, I didn't like the way they launched the Alba with this kind of, like, as you call it, blitzkrieg marketing approach. Didn't like that. And they did it again with, I think, the Lyric 2. I thought, no, I'm not going to get involved with this. Number two is actually a positive. So I bought a pair of their 105 Air or the Air 105. The sort of, it's like the 109 Pro, but I think they've just taken a little bit off the top. And it's such a wonderful sounding headphone. I absolutely love it. And it's so comfortable that I look at the Poet and think, as good as that might be, it's going to have to be bloody stratospherically amazing to pull me away from that 105 Air or Air 105.
And I tell you right now, it's not. I have the 109 Pro in house, which is the Air with the wood cup rather than the composite.
Yes.
So if you want a high resolution or higher resolution, go with the cheaper dynamic headphone. That's all I say for now.
Yeah. I love the 109 Pro, and I like the 105 Air even more, because I saw some early reviews and thought, okay, this looks interesting. It's cheap enough that I can just take a punt and go and buy one from my local dealer, which I did. Shout out to Hi-Fi im Hinterhof in Berlin, who came through very quickly actually on that, which is great. And I really, really liked them. And I don't know, I just don't feel... I think, I was saying this to a patron the other day actually, that affordable headphones, say below $1,000, have gotten really, really good in the last 5 or 6 years.
They have.
You know, especially models coming from China, which normally you kind of go, oh no, it's a Chinese product, but no, some of them
like
are really
one.
good. You know, is that the Auni, the one you mentioned before?
639, I believe. Yeah.
Right, and I love that FIO. Is it the FT3?
Yeah.
That I have. Yeah, I love that. I think that's fantastic. But for me, I don't know whether it's an age thing, Srajan, but I am really starting to value comfort over sound quality. So maybe it is, you know, it's like there's nothing like a good sit down, and I guess there's nothing like a comfortable pair of headphones, which, I mean, the ones I'm wearing right now are Audio-Technica, is it MH40 they're called? They're not especially comfortable. They're good for podcasts, but they're not great in the long run, but I have to wear closed backs for this. So, but yeah, the comfort on those entry-level Mezes, fantastic. Same with the FIO. I'm sure with your Auna is just as good.
Yeah.
So it's getting that balance right, isn't it, between comfort and sound quality. And if you can nail both with an 8 out of 10, I think that's a win.
Yes, and I would also remind people of the obvious, which is that if you want the highest performance for the money, headphones are the way to go for many reasons. But you take the room out of the equation, you take distance losses out of the equation, you take crossovers out of the equation, you have the driver within centimeters of your ear. That lowers the cost. You can listen when you want, where you want, at the volume you want, without bothering anybody else. In order to equal or outdo the performance of a good but fairly priced headphone system over speakers in an untreated room.
Yeah, speakers in an untreated room, especially as bad as the ones that I've had here, forget it. No way. I'd never do that again. Headphones are the way to go. But I did make a video about this recently, and I titled it in a way that would kind of pull the headphone people across. And there was a lot of pushback on headphones being better than speakers in a poor sounding room, mainly because headphones apparently don't have the on-body impact. They don't stage as well as a pair of speakers, which let's assume that's true, but it's still way better than having speakers in a crappy room, which most people have. I think most people's rooms are compromised.
Well, I would definitely say it is absolutely true that headphones can't stage as large and free as well set up speakers, and yes, you don't get that sort of full skin assault, especially in the low frequencies. It's not possible. But it's a matter of priorities, right? I'd much rather have the low distortion, high resolution, sort of smaller, more intimate sound of headphones than boomy bass and splashy highs and an echoey sort of swimmy ambience.
Right. Yeah.
All of that. Just because it's bigger and louder. And that's my third topic today is going to get there. But so I'll just preview this notion that when industry pundits sort of decry the pending death of hi-fi because nobody's interested anymore and, it's all dying out. My question would be that if the average person today is reared or introduced to listening to music via headphones, first earbuds and smartphone, and if they upgrade, then some nicer headphones and maybe a portable player. So we are training them in time fidelity, no crossover, no phase shift, no room issues, full bandwidth, high resolution, and then we expect them to, when they have money, to upgrade to loudspeakers, and suddenly we have time distortion, we have crossover distortion, we have room issues, we have boomy bass, we have all kinds of issues. That doesn't seem to be a career path or an upgrade path. It's just the speakers play louder and they play bigger. But when we're talking general quality, it's lower than what these people are already used to.
I would agree with you, actually, yes. Yeah, even like a pair of Apple AirPods compared to, I don't know, let's say, let's go really low. Let's go like $1,000 hi-fi system. So amp, DAC, streamer, speakers. I don't think there would be, maybe I personally would prefer the speaker system, personally. But in an untreated room, no way, I would take the AirPods every time. But that's just, my preference. Do you know what, actually, I think might help the disconnect between headphones and speakers in a room is the proliferation of listening bars. Now, they're called listening bars or hi-fi, but whatever they're called, hi-fi bars, they've come out of the culture of Japan. And I do think that they're just bars with a nice hi-fi system if everybody else keeps talking as normal. Because it's not a listening bar unless everybody shuts up. But I love the idea of listening bars because they do promote the value and importance of good sound through speakers. I think that's really important. And I think I went to one recently a couple of months ago in Berlin. And the crowd there were younger than me. So I thought that was really interesting. And there seems to be loads of these popping up. So people are being exposed once again to speakers in public places where it might have been the movie theatre in the past, but generally those speakers are hidden away behind a wall, right? You don't really see them. So because speakers of I don't know, like a big, let's say a Wharfdale Linton size, right? Those kinds of speakers have sort of slowly vanished from public life. Unless you see them in the audiophile world, they don't exist in the day-to-day. But there is a pair in my local bookstore, so they probably got some arrangement with a German distributor. So where, I say bookstore, it's also a vinyl store, so they're trying to make that connection, which makes sense, right? So I'm hoping we're going to see more and more speakers in public places that say, hey, this is important, which is why I like what Devon Turnbull is doing, because he's doing a bit of that. You know, I know he's doing expensive Klipsch designs, but he's also selling to young hipster kids in New York, which I think is also important. It might basically selling to anything but the grumpy 60-year-old audiophile, I think, is a win,
right?
Because there are thousands of those available, right? We can just throw a rock in the air and we'll hit like 3 on the internet. So I like the idea of young people getting into hi-fi. I've been doing this 15 years. Ever since I started, people have been saying, "Oh yeah, hi-fi is dying," and blah blah blah.
Right.
And it's become its own cliche, because there is a grain of truth to it. And even there's a manufacturer I spoke to recently who didn't say it on air, but said it after our conversation. He said, "Look, I just don't see any growth in the hi-fi world," and he might be right.
Well, it may be in the
respects.
traditional hi-fi world.
Yes.
But what if we are talking hi-fi consumers, but the way that music is being consumed is just changing?
Like what? What do you mean by?
Well,
way it's
the
being
most
consumed?
obvious thing would be multitasking, right?
Mhm.
That you're listening to some kind of a mobile system, but you're not sitting in the sweet spot in the basement with the lights out.
Right.
You're
right.
doing something else while you're doing it. You might be working out, you might be on the tube, you might be multitasking, but the way that you consume music is different from the way that you and I got exposed to it. I mean, my parents had a Revox open reel and a big Yamaha receiver and a set of little Darko-Audio speakers, and that's how I was exposed to sound, you know. But if I grew up today, I'd be exposed via earbuds and a smartphone. So that the consumption mechanism is different, and the type of music and how long it lasts is different. Like the tunes tend to be shorter. It's not like a symphony that lasts 1.5 hours and the first movement alone is 20 minutes. I mean, a lot of people nowadays are not used to sitting through something like that. They haven't been exposed to it.
I want to talk about tubes or valves. I don't know which countries call them what. This is actually related to the vinyl flattener, because this comes from Musical Fidelity, and it is called I've lost the name of it. It's called the X Tube. Now the X Tube is funny because it's a Musical Fidelity product that used to be made 30 years ago. It wasn't called the X Tube, and I remember browsing What Hi-Fi magazine in probably '93, thinking that looks really interesting. The premise of this, that it would improve the sound of my CD player, but then I kind of got I went a bit cool on it, and then I forgot about it and I didn't buy one. So what it is it's a cylinder, and the cylindrical kind of, Musical Fidelity still say that that's to kind of minimize internal vibrations. Okay, but it could easily just be a long flat cuboid type case, but it's not. It's a cylinder. Inside that is a single circuit board with analog inputs and analog outputs, and in the middle is a tube circuit. And the idea is you attach it to the output of your streamer or your CD player or your source device, and then connect the output to your integrated amp. So it sits between your streaming DAC and your integrated amp, or your CD player and your integrated amp. And I guess you could also put it between your preamp and your power amp. Or, and I think this is one that I'm interested to explore, a DAC with a volume control and a power amp. Because generally speaking, I'm not so much of a fan of that particular setup, where you have a streaming DAC going direct into a power amp. It lacks body. Now, one of the reasons that it lacks body might be to do with one of this X-Tube's selling points.
Impedance
because
matching.
yes, it inserts tubes into the circuit path, right? And that's a simple thing that most people can grab onto. and go, oh yeah, I like the sound of tubes. I want to put a little bit in the sound of my hi-fi system. That sounds good to me. I'll give you the price now so we can all breathe easy and I don't have to kind of go hunting for it. It's 500 euros, right? Mm-hmm. So 500 euros to upgrade the sound of your DAC or your source component, whatever. But it will also potentially improve the impedance match between your source device and your integrated, or your pre and your power, or your DAC with volume control and your power amp. Because what you want to see, and I learned this from a Paul McGowan video, is you want to see a low output impedance on your source device and a relatively high input impedance on what you're going into for what's called a good impedance match. It doesn't mean the two values are the same. The match comes from them being quite a way away from each other. And if they're too close,
I think the rule of thumb used to be a 1 to 10 ratio was considered to be ideal.
Okay. Right. I thought it was more than that, but I don't remember because I haven't looked into this for so long. But I thought, okay, this is interesting, and I like the idea of adding tubes to something. I think a lot of people would like that. But the impedance match angle, I think, is just as much a talking point as the tubes. Now, of course, if your streaming DAC already has a low output impedance, and it'll be on the specs of most manufacturers, I think, on their website, and your, let's say, integrated amp already has a high input impedance, it might not do anything for you apart from the tube infusion. You know, it's like a tea bag, just filling a cup of hot water.
And
it's going to add a little bit of flavour.
We should probably qualify that by saying that this is a tube buffer, correct? Meaning that
correct,
it doesn't add any voltage gain.
Correct. There's no gain stage in this, right? Yeah, it's just like I guess you'd call it.
No, I like your idea about the tea bag, the infusion.
Right.
You know, you're not adding temperature, you're not adding volume. It's just flavor.
Just a bit of flavour and a bit of something else.
Yeah.
And I think for $500, it's worth a punt for a lot of people. Because I looked at this and I got straight on the phone to my UK contact for Musical Fidelity, and I said, "Can you send me one to Portugal yesterday, please? And can you send me one to Berlin next week?" So I think I've got one arriving here in a couple of days. I'm going to put it between a WIM Ultra DAC and then whatever amplifier I've got running at the time to see what kind of difference it makes. Because I think it might do nothing, or it might be to do so little that I think, okay, it's probably much ado about nothing. But I do want to try the WIM Ultra into a power amp. Maybe that first watt that you sent me.
Okay.
You know, is the F5 or 3? I can't remember now.
F5.
F5. I go WIM Ultra volume controlled into that power amp, and then see if the tube buffer makes a difference in between. You know, see if it adds the body and the weight that I miss from going DAC direct, which is the qualities that I do miss in
Do we
generally
know
speaking.
what tubes are in there? Are they like 6922s or 12AU7s or 5687s or what are they?
So one is the E88CC. There's another code for that, isn't there?
Yeah.
Is it 12AX7?
Yeah, it's one of the 12s. But
yeah,
I'm not good on those codes.
Neither am I. It says, 6922 E88C.
Okay.
There's got to be some equivalent, but 60.
Yeah, so it's something that you can easily get. Yeah.
Yeah, so that I think I remember that the original version of this was discontinued because they couldn't get the tubes. The tubes went out of production somewhere else. Some other company was making them, so they had to take the product with it. So I think Heinz Lichtenegger, who's brought this back, has been a little bit clever, and he's just picked a much more available tube. I mean, E8870C, I think CC is very easily available, isn't it? I think. Mm-hmm. I think it is. And you can also, if you want to get into, I won't in my video, but you know, you can get into changing the tubes out, trying different flavors, so different tea bags, if you like,
right.
You know, in your cup of hot water. But I think this is, I classify this as a fun product, right? It's not there for, you know, lifting a veil or anything like that. If anything, it's going to put a veil in the way, which I actually kind of want if I want the meatier sound. But, you know, I thought it was really interesting, and it did spark memories of the product that I wanted when I was like 20-something. and now I'm getting two of the damn things. So one here and one there, and I'm going to make a video about it. Plus, I think it'll be yeah.
Plus, it also has something else going for it, and that is that if you're curious about tubes,
yep,
and you want to hear tubes in a sort of idealized environment, you don't want tubes to drive a variable low impedance, which would be like a loudspeaker, right? So you have a tube amplifier, and now it has to drive a loudspeaker whose impedance changes with frequency. You don't want that. That's stressing out the tube. What you do want is you want the tube to drive the fixed high impedance of a following preamplifier or amplifier or integrated, because now the tube is not stressing, right? So you hear the tube at its best rather than sweating and just barely making it. Okay, so my third product. Let's start with the question. You and I have experience with active speakers.
We do.
And we have talked about the advantages they have over passive speakers.
Many times,
What is virtually always one thing that designers of active speakers do that you can't do with passive speakers, or at least not easily?
Well, you put the amp after the crossover.
Yes, but
and then you match the amp. You match the amp to the driver. I don't know where you're going with this.
Okay. Okay. Admittedly, a little bit vague. DSP. What can you do in DSP besides frequency domain compensation?
You can make sure your crossover doesn't introduce time domain errors.
That's what I was hoping you'd say. Yes. So
there we go. I got there in the end.
So
I'm a bit slow.
So very often, what designers of active speakers will do, they will use DSP to minimize or eliminate time domain errors that have to do with, vertical baffles and basically the tweeter output arriving at the ear just slightly before the mid-range or bass. So rather than having to slant the baffle back or having some kind of Mayan step pyramid scheme going, you do it in DSP. You fix time domain errors. Well, in Slovakia, there's a chap called Andrew Startsev who has a small company called DMAX.Audio. And Andrew is a recording engineer. And Andrew apparently is very clever when it comes to code writing. And so he used to make plugins for mastering engineers. I don't know anything about mastering. I don't know exactly what those plugins did, but they were software based. That's sort of his forte. And about a year or two ago, actually I think we might even have covered this, or I might have done a remix for you. There were these little cubes. A cube speaker made out of solid oak with one single driver and an outboard amplifier that was where he used his own code to optimize the time domain behavior, the phase shift of this speaker. But it was basically a one-way. Well, Andrew just came out with a two-way, and he said he made it specifically for me. Yeah, right. But what inspired him was that speaker I reviewed previously, he had conceptualized purely for pro use. As a location monitor next to a recording console. Because in his mind, that speaker has no taste. It doesn't mean it tastes bad, it just means it's neutral. It is so linear that he did not think pleasure listeners, home-based listeners would enjoy it. And I listened to it and I freaked out. I mean, I thought it was absolutely fabulous. It did things that I didn't expect.
You'd have to, yeah.
And then he thought to himself, well, okay, maybe I can improve on that. How do I improve on that? I need bigger drivers. Well, if I need bigger drivers, I need a separate tweeter because eventually the bigger driver won't do enough treble. So now he came out with something called the PH61. And it's a two-way. And it's active. And this time, instead of having an outboard sort of single rack space amplifier, the amplifiers are built in, like a classic active speaker. It comes in two flavors. The basic is $2,000 a pair, and it has a no-name, which means we don't know who makes it, Class D amplifier built in, and a single input, which is an analog XLR. That's it, nothing else. And a power inlet, and a power plug, a mains toggle on the rear. That's it. Now for $2,600 or euros a pair, you can get the advanced version, and now you have an Encore Fusion amp built in, and that has additional inputs and outputs. Now you also have digital inputs.
Right.
So if you want to come out of your computer straight into this, and you have digital volume control, you don't need anything else, just like a regular pair of active speakers. But what is different about this one is that once again, he's using his own time correction code to eliminate the time domain errors that any speaker will have because, and this is Andrew now speaking, he said, a dynamic driver is mechanical, right? It has moving mass. And by virtue of have moving mass, it cannot start instantaneously. There will have to be a slight delay. And it also can't stop instantaneously. There will be a little bit of an overshoot before it settles. And that overshoot in both ways is distortion. Now, we cannot eliminate this if we're using dynamic drivers because they weigh. They have some kind of weight that we need to move.
Right.
And the dynamic driver has something that's called a spider. We have the surround on the outside that fixes the diaphragm to the basket, and that's moving in and out. But on the inside, we have usually, it's like a corrugated cloth that is folded. And that cloth allows the driver to go out, but it's also resisting the driver to go out because that's what pulls it back in. So we have time delay built into the whole concept of the dynamic driver. And if you look at the step response, you will actually see it. And so Andrew's code that he has written to his own DSP corrects for that. The drivers in this is a 6.5-inch midwoofer from Purify, which is the same company that makes the Purify amplifier modules, which are the next generation Encore. And so Purify is a joint venture between Mr. Lingdorf and
Bruno Putzis.
Bruno Putzis, and there's another gentleman on Bruno's caliber, but I think he's Danish.
Lars Risbo. Lars Risbo.
There we go, yeah.
Yeah, we couldn't forget his name because we would get a stiffly wordy letter from Lars.
Exactly. So Purify makes OEM amplifiers, the next version of Encore, and they make quite a range of dynamic drivers. Also very high tech and very low distortion. So there's a 6.5-inch version of that in this speaker, and there is a 1-inch metal dome tweeter that I don't know who makes them. Now, what this basically gives you is it gives you like a widebander. A widebander doesn't really have time distortion other than its own weight, but it's very, very low. But it doesn't have a crossover. So the closest thing we can come to this kind of sound would be a single driver wideband speaker. But we would never be able to get this kind of bandwidth in this small of a cabinet for $2,000 from a single driver widebander. It just can't be done. The widebander will need a rear horn. It's going to get big. The rear horn is going to add time delay. It's going to be slower. It's not going to be as well damped. It can be done, but it's going to be big and it's going to be costlier. Now, what does it sound like to remove time domain distortion that is usually baked in to any speaker we listen to? We don't know because we can't remove it. There's not a switch where we suddenly can A-B. We can only do it with a speaker like that suddenly doesn't suffer that same problem to the same extent. And it is really amazing. It's the closest thing to headphone listening, to a good headphone that doesn't have speaker problems. And I don't mean room-based problems. I mean crossover and phase shift induced problems. There's a kind of clarity that makes things extremely holographic and extremely precise. So the more complex the music gets, the less crowded it gets. Usually as the music gets more complex and we turn the volume up, things get bigger and they get denser and they get closer and closer to this proverbial wall of sound where everything is just there, but it's all sort of jammed together like wet cat litter. It's all clumping. Or like watercolors that are running into each other, and there's no more any space between the performers. Well, with this speaker, it's the opposite. It makes space between, and not just left to right, but even more importantly, front to back. Things where usually, if you were sitting in a concert, the performers in the first row would actually literally be in front of the performers in the second row. They would sort of be shadowing them. And this suddenly is like, the front performer is translucent. You can see the one that's behind it. He's not standing in the way. That's maybe the best that I can describe it. It's a very fascinating experience to sort of suddenly remove a kind of distortion that is usually inherent in the experience. And it's not to say it has no distortion in that realm. It just has enough less of it that the difference is very noticeable. So for $2,000 or euros, you can get an active speaker that does something that other active speakers don't do.
So
because
we should
it
all
relies
move
on this particular code that this gentleman has developed to address this particular kind of time distortion.
It sounds like somebody will buy his code. In the long run, maybe a bigger fish will just... Or maybe he doesn't want to sell it. I don't know. Maybe...
Well, that's obviously now, that's the flip side. We're dealing with a small outfit. We're dealing with handmade, small volume production. Not a whole lot of people know about it. For the same amount of money, you could buy like a KEF LS50. You get colors, you get curves, you get cachet, you get resale value, you get recognition, you get all of that. Most people would go that way. They would buy the KEF. But I think the right kind of person that already knows that they are sensitive to the time domain, possibly more so than the frequency domain. People that traditionally would pursue it like a Van der Steen speaker because it's time aligned. Or before Thiel sold out, when Jim Thiel was still running the company, that was another design that was time coherent. People that are into widebanders, like single driver speakers, but they also recognize that they have issues. Those are the kinds of people that I think would be really attracted to this speaker. It's the DMAX PH61 for 2,000 or 2,600 a pair, depending on what kind of amplifier you have in it.
I mean, it sounds pretty interesting for the savvy consumer who's seen the LS50 and been there, done that, or maybe the Technics, the 700 speakers I just covered, been there, done that. Maybe.
And I should qualify this, that this speaker, and this is important, so it's bad that I nearly forgot it. It's meant for the near field. It's ideally used between 75 to 150 centimeters, which basically means for you and I desktop, or like a really small office where you're just sitting really close.
I think
it's
we would be amazed
for
big rooms. I know, I understand, but I think there'll be loads of people watching this or listening to this, Srajan, who are working out of a 2x3 room. Meters, that is, like not feet. I mean, 2 meters by 3 meters room. Like so 6 feet by 9 feet. So people are working in very small spaces. I've done this in years past. I've tried to make things work, and when I knew far less about room acoustics, I realised I was trying to get a round peg into a square hole. It was never going to work. So you kind of have to learn the hard way. But I guess, if you're working in a small room, a pair of these and maybe a small sub, maybe. Is there a sub out on the amp?
No.
Or on the back?
Don't need a small. You do not need a sub with these. At this particular distance, if you don't do something insane and play ungodly loud, which you wouldn't want to with the speaker that close, the amount of low-end density and reach that he has built in, because he's using DSP and the power of Class D to delay the roll-off, which the speaker otherwise would have, because it's sealed, it's not ported. Again, that's done for time domain. It's really, really good. So piano, upright bass, big drums, kick drum. At that distance, it's all there. You do not need a sub. In fact, I think trying to integrate a sub with a speaker that is so good in the time domain, that would be a little difficult. I'm not saying impossible, but I wouldn't even go there. It's not necessary.
Well, this is good to know. I mean, because I guess the interested parties wouldn't know that unless you'd said so. And we'll put links to this and all the other products that we've talked about today in the show notes below this video / this podcast, wherever you're kind of consuming it. I think that draws us to a close, Srajan, unless there's any other business.
No, not for me.
No? Okay. Well, thank you very much and talk to you next time.